nothing left for me to hate, so I can lay me down, my brothers, on the ground. I bled today until Coyote comes to raise me up and carries me
Hello, welcome to the Scottish Rugby Podcast, brought to you by the Scottish Rugby Blog. In the absence of anyone who's able to host tonight, I'm Johnny McGinty. Hello, nice to have you along. I've done it already. I spent all day going, I'm not going to do the tonight thing, and I've done it already. So, welcome, whatever time it is you're listening, you can mark that one up, Mr. Riley, for when Manson's back. Welcome, whatever time of day that you're listening. We are brought to you by the Sports Social Network, where you will find a plethora, I discovered recently, of excellent rugby content, including ourselves, obviously. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts. If you are particularly enjoying the content, we're also on Patreon, where for the price of about a third of this supermarket wine that we were just discussing before we came on air, you can have access to an extra 45 minutes of podcast tonight, where it gets a little bit looser in the content and the language, and our much coveted super secret Facebook group where you can add your ideas for Hands in the Ruck in 5022, which we'll come to later on. Looking forward, we'll be previewing all of this weekend's games over on the Patreon side. Today, we will look at last weekend's Women's Six Nations and Champions Cup quarterfinals. To do that, I am joined by Mark Riley. Good evening, Mark. I've done it twice, Mark. I've done it twice.
Don't worry about it.
Hello, Mark.
Hello. How are you doing?
And I'm also joined by Leslie Ramage. Hello, Leslie. How are you?
Hello, Johnny. I am fine. Thank you very much.
So before we get started on last weekend's games, we will take a quick look through the news, as much of it as there is this week. We'll start with Glasgow. That's probably the slightly more straightforward news. Kerr Yuill progresses from an academy contract up to a full-team contract, Mark. That's 7 academy players coming through for Glasgow now, which is great, obviously. You know, we saw some of them in the Champions Cup and things this week, but is there more experience needed at Glasgow, particularly at 10? Is there a gap to fill that we can't fill with the academy?
I think so. I think the thing about the academy players signing up, and one of the things that's really impressive is they've all had game time. This is not guys that are coming out and we're going to say, "Oh, see how you go." Every one of these players that have signed have played a full, at least one, if not more, full cap in the URC, which is great news. But yeah, Glasgow need a 10, right? Lancaster's decent and probably has a future. Charlie Savala has been injured since before he arrived at Glasgow. He arrived at Glasgow in May last year, and we haven't seen him at all.
Yep.
So if Glasgow intend to continue to be a championship troubling team, or a winner of the URC troubling team, Lancaster and Savala are not the pair, in my humble opinion.
No, to be fair to Dan, I think he played really well on Saturday. We'll obviously come on to that later. Adam Hastings did make a bit of a difference. Like or loathe Adam Hastings, and there are a lot of people, both Glasgow fans and fans of other teams, who are definitely in the latter. But he made a difference when he came on Saturday. Glasgow were obviously shuffling around a little bit, but Dan Lancaster can't do it on his own. And if Charlie Savala's not going to get fit, there needs to be somebody else of experience and calibre, I think, not just someone coming from the academy. Over the road, Leslie, a little bit more news. You look understandably thrilled. Two new coaches for Edinburgh this week. Brad Davis joins from the Queensland Reds as defence coach. Defence coaches in Super Rugby, notoriously sought after. And Tim Sampson from Fijian Drua is joining as attack coach. I'm assuming to ask James Lang to play like a Fijian. So, I mean, the main thing that jumps out is there's what we would probably call, and we spoke about it between ourselves yesterday when the news was announced, and there's a bit of a Nusafora pipeline developing in Edinburgh. Now, you and I have a fairly similar opinion of him. Do you think that's going to strengthen Edinburgh?
Well, could they do much worse? Probably not. I mean, let's be honest, they're what, 13th or something in the URC table at the moment. I mean, I think if you can do better than that, you're doing all right. I have to say, I hadn't heard of either of these coaches. These are not guys who are tripping off your tongue when you think of quality coaches like going around at the moment. And it does, as you've sort of said, they do seem to be best buds or have either worked with or played with David Nusafora. It's just, I mean, it could be that's all we could get, which is also quite sad. But yeah, I didn't see those announcements and think, wow, what a coup. It was like, who? I was like, go Google these guys because I haven't heard of them. Yeah, time will tell.
So Latman in the YouTube comments saying the Reds have the second highest tackle completed stat, which is excellent. The Reds have also shipped 120 points in the last 3 games in Super Rugby. So I will take tackle completion.
Excellent, perhaps.
If he can build a strong defence for Edinburgh around great tackle completion, then excellent. Like, more power to him. But you can't ship 40 points a game as a defence coach. That's something that probably needs to be addressed. Mark, I'm not going to ask Leslie this because I feel like you're going to have a significantly different take to the in-house Edinburgh fan. If you speak to a Munster, Connacht or Ulster fan, they've all got a lot to say about David Nusafora having his favourite when he was performance director at the IRFU and how well that went for the other 3 provinces. Is employing 2 coaches who come from the same part of the world and played for the same teams as him an indication that he's maybe got a favourite coming up in Scotland as well?
And let's be honest, the chances of him not knowing at least one of them, the French coach, was it the defence coach or the attack coach who actually played with him? Yeah. You don't want to howl about, they scoured the world and found the guy that had a pint with Nusafora. It kind of looks that way, doesn't it?
It has got a bit of a feeling like that.
I mean,
like Leslie says, in his defence, and I don't want to be putting the boot in this early, I imagine that when the rugby vacancies thing came up for Edinburgh defence coach, that there was not a flood of CVs coming in. Yes. So, maybe it's more that he reached out to someone who he knew would take the job because he was struggling to fill the job. rather than he went looking for somebody who was going to be his first choice. I don't know. But it does seem like there's a bit of a group developing there. Whether that's by choice or by accident or by necessity, I think it's something that probably the optics are not great. And when we get to Hands in the Ruck, we'll talk about the optics of coaching hires not being great, because it's far from the worst this week, but it's not the best. The other bit of news then, and this kind of leads us on quite well to starting to look at this weekend's games, is that the news came out today. I don't think it was really a surprise to anyone. Emma Orr is done for the rest of the Six Nations. We'll just move on to talking about Saturday afternoon's game, Mark. That is a huge loss for Scotland.
Yeah, it's a massive loss. She's a very special player, and she would grace any team in the Six Nations. However, to be fair, Evie Wills is no slouch either. I'm old enough to remember 3 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago, where a loss of a first choice player in the midfield for Scotland would have meant us calling up a comparative amateur. The fact that our midfield now has Evie Wills and Meryl Smith in it that's all right,
Yeah.
Super players. Emma Orr is a massive loss. She's an incredible talent. However, I think we have solidity there and two talented players to step in.
Yeah, for me, I think Emma Orr probably runs some of the best lines in the world of any centre. In fact, of any back, really. She's incredible, and she was a bit of a key for Scotland on Saturday afternoon, because when it wasn't really clicking, it was her that did a lot of the hard work that sort of pulled it over.
Yeah.
Leslie, as far as Scotland in it goes, that was close to being the most Scotlanding any Scotland team has ever Scotlanded on Saturday afternoon. By the time it got to the 87th minute, that was it was squeaky bum time and then some. Well,
I have a small confession. I only saw to about minute 50. I went off to a gig, so I didn't see the most of the second half. But I was keeping an eye on the score on my phone. I thought, Scotland are winning. That's great. But then I checked in on social media to see what was happening, and it was just Scotland fans stressed to the max about the last sort of few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't do it though. They didn't Scotland it. That's the main thing. They sought out, won the match. Yep. If that would be in Edinburgh, they wouldn't have done that.
Because they wouldn't have been in that position, or because they would have lost.
Both.
I'm very struck by Helen Nelson saying in the press this week that they needed an 85-minute performance, and they were glad they put in an 85-minute performance. I think was the word she used, and that's exactly spot on. 80 minutes would not have been enough to see that match out. It was good. I did watch it live, and I was waiting for a full Scotlanding.
Well, what I was going to say to you, Mark, actually, was on the subject of Helen Nelson. Another thing that has not traditionally been a Scotland strong point that really showed up in a big way on Saturday afternoon was the kicking from hand from all of the backs. Chloe Rowley kicked really well. Meryl Smith kicked really well. But that was an absolute masterclass in the second half from Helen Nelson. She was finding space behind the Welsh defence. She was testing the Welsh back three with high balls. She was putting through grubbers. That's something that's not always been Scotland's strong point. And I was fuming when Scotland were losing games in the World Cup before last because of place kicking. And at the same time, Chris Patterson, who was Scotland's national kicking coach, was doing the punditry for Premier Sports of the URC, but
Thousands
what
of
a
miles.
difference the kicking's made, and Helen Nelson in particular, Mark.
Yeah, massively, hugely. She rightly got player of the match. She was absolutely fantastic. I don't know if that is, and I genuinely don't know, is that her simply learning, maturing as a player? Is that different coaching? Is that skills coming on board? I genuinely can't answer that. But Nelly, as they call her, was absolutely fantastic. She was superb at the weekend. And it wasn't just the kicking; it was the choice of kicks as well.
Yeah.
Pinning Wales back when they needed to be, and that kind of thing. Yeah, and as you rightly point out, Johnny, the fact that Meryl Smith also is that. Meryl Smith's almost a second 5'8". You know, she's another playmaker out there. And I think that makes a substantial difference as well, because they can both make that choice on the fly, and they were doing so. And yeah, I think it was, whether it was completely instrumental in us in the win, because a couple of tries were exceptional from exceptional play, but it was absolutely instrumental in our control of the game.
Yeah.
Super.
We've spoken about Meryl Smith quite a lot, Leslie. There was a few sort of not changes, but maybe reappearances in the back line. We've obviously not seen Meryl Smith in almost 18 months. We've not seen Shona Campbell in almost 3 years. They seem to slip back in quite well, and that's something we've spoken about it with Glasgow over on the men's side. The national men's team have maybe struggled with that a little bit. Do you think that the women's team are doing a better job of the fact that players can slip back into the system and you do not notice an obvious difference in people there that haven't been there for a while?
Yeah, they're such a tight unit as well. So even if you haven't been playing, they've been part of that group and that setup. Meryl maybe not, because she has been injured, but she has been before. So you're back in with people that you know really well, and you're really tight, and you probably see them at club, and yeah, they seem such a good group that I think that probably makes it easier when you know someone really well, and therefore when you're playing with them, it's a bit easier. Whereas maybe the men's team don't quite all have that same connection with each other. It's maybe that a little bit harder in the national men's team. I mean, to do that kind of thing. But it's maybe a nod to the coaching of Brian, perhaps in the past. He was obviously a very good coach, and Sione hasn't changed that much. Okay, maybe the kicking, but a lot of it is still really strong attack. A lot of it's very the same, so it's maybe a bit easier to slot in. You're doing what you did before.
Yeah, and a really good point by Andy Steele on Facebook as well, kind of saying what we were saying earlier. We are definitely building depth, because it wasn't long ago that we would be asking the front row in particular to go almost 80 minutes. And now we do have, I think we've gone from Scotland maybe having 13 to 15 really good players to we've now got 23 really good players and more. And, when we come to talk about next week's game or this weekend's game over on the Patreon side, we'll talk about more big names that are coming back for Scotland. Leslie, I wanted to ask a little bit about the forwards. There were maybe a few issues. I wouldn't say it was disastrous or anything, but it was one of those days at the line out that Scotland seemed to have every so often. Wales were getting a lot of success with maybe just being that little bit more powerful at the breakdown. We obviously know, what's coming on Saturday afternoon. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's worrying the way the forward performance went, particularly in the first half, or do you think that's something that they could probably tighten up and it's maybe just a bit of first game?
You're playing, Emily Cobra started, didn't she? And she's only played Celtic Challenge, so this is a massive step up for her. And she did have some really impressive stats, over the course of the game. But she'll learn from that, and as Sione and Rachel Malcolm have spoken about, this this is the start of a new 4-year cycle, and these people need to be brought in and bloodied and given time to learn, basically. And lineouts being a struggle is a Scotland thing across all the teams sometimes. You know, we see it. We've seen it at Edinburgh, we've seen it at Scotland men. I don't know if it's just pressure or it gets to them. Just a bad day, yips, whatever. But I think some things will be ironed out, but I think we just have to give these girls time. You know, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. And this is a long-term plan. If they don't get things right, the Six Nations, it's not the end of the world. It's experience and they'll learn from it.
Yeah. But before we move on from Scotland women then, Mark, as far as the first game in a 4-year cycle goes, are we happy with it? Are we ahead of where we'd like to be? Is there more we'd like to work on that you would have thought?
Oh, I think there has to be more. I mean, we have some debutants and we have a new coaching setup. But we've got to be happy with that, right? At the end of the day, it was a win away in Wales. And the first match that many of these women had played at the Principality Stadium, which I thought was significant. And I'm really happy for them that they could win there. But I mean, we had, was it 3 or 4 debutants, of which one was a starter? So to do that and come away as well, having the win, yeah, I think it's a good place. I wouldn't say it's ahead of where we expect to be, but I think with the whole new setup and at the beginning of a cycle, if you were playing nothing but veterans at the beginning of a 4-year cycle, that would be more of a concern. But the fact that we're blooding youngsters and still winning, that's a good thing. Yeah, I'm happy with it. Yeah.
And Leslie, Mark kind of touched on it there. They're going to play in the Principality, Murrayfield, and the Aviva across this tournament, which obviously, you know, at the most basic level is huge for the Women's Six Nations, for the women's game in general. Bearing in mind that it is 4 years or 3.5 years till the next World Cup, and the last 2 World Cups have each got significantly bigger than the last. That big stadium experience is going to make a bit of a difference as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this the first time they've played Murrayfield? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, given they've never got to experience that'll be huge. You know, they're hopefully, fingers crossed, mostly your fans in the stadium. So I hope they soak it in and, you know, get used to having all that noise and hype, and, you know, the Aviva will be boring as hell because it always is, but, you know, the Murrayfield should be good. I hope they get the Piper and all the same stuff the men get. I hope they get the full Buna experience.
Did anyone see the only good April Fool's Day a couple of weeks ago on the SRU Instagram page, where they made it look like Rona Lloyd was going to be the Piper on the roof for the anthem?
Yeah, absolutely. And I almost bought it. Right. I was watching it and going, oh, she must be injured. It wasn't until she started talking about, but then I'll run down from the gods down to the team setup. I thought, nah, because I watched it on the second. And then it was like, oh, hang on a minute. When was this put out? Yeah. And I got it. But yeah, came close to actually getting me because I know she's musical, right? They all talk about her bringing the ukulele into
her TikTok is full of her daily bagpipe lessons.
Right, okay.
It's very good.
Quite something. And then the other thing, and I mentioned it to you guys that on Saturday morning, that we can't come away from Scotland women, and it's not, I promise I'm not trying to delay what we have to talk about next, but did anyone see the Braden board on Saturday morning? That is like a level of organisation that I just cannot comprehend, because they've got the 3 braiders, and then everybody gets like a 20-minute slot or a 10. I think it's maybe even a 10-minute slot, and they were going from like 8:30 in the morning till 12:30, and it's just like person after person, and it's like a military operation. It's wild. And
Not
I know I
something,
mentioned this.
not something you have to worry too much on game day.
No, exactly. Yeah, not an issue for me. I mentioned this to you guys at the time as well, but I was speaking to Ellis Martin not too long ago, who is one of the Scotland braiding team, and they take it's like 50p or a quid off of everybody every game when they braid their hair, and then they donate whatever they've made to Little Princess Trust at the end of the tournament, which is lovely. I think it's really nice, and every time I see it, it blows my mind, like the organisation that they go through. And it's like not simple either.
No, absolutely.
Everybody's got their like preferred. I don't know. I'm not going to talk about braids. I've
Honestly,
not a clue.
Yeah, genuinely, things you never thought you'd learn until you become the father of a young daughter is how to do a French plait. You know.
Yep, I could do that. I learned that not that long ago.
You need to let Murray McCallum know he's trying to braid his daughter's hair and is struggling.
I saw him go to is it called like Pints and Ponytails or something? Beers and Braids, something like. I'm desperate to go. As soon as there's one up here, I'm going because it looks brilliant.
I'm not convinced Lara would let me do it now, her being 23. But
no.
No, maybe not.
All right, let's talk about something else. Mark, Glasgow's Champions Cup run came to an end Saturday afternoon. I am torn. I was gutted on Saturday. I'm torn now between disappointment and a bit of relief as we get to the sharp end of the URC and being in the Champions Cup knockouts. Is that just like a cop-out?
Oh, I'm still fully disappointed. I genuinely have not been that down about a club game in a very long time. I honestly thought Glasgow would do that. I thought Glasgow had it in them to win that game and probably comfortably. Yeah, it was. I was I was about to resign from rugby the early half of this week. I just had enough. Right, I was not in a good place about it. But it is what it is. I think it was probably just a game too far for that squad depth in knockout rugby. If we'd had even half of the injured players, and I don't want to make excuses because Glasgow are all about club, they're all about team, and they rightly should not make any excuses. However, I could name, off the top of my head, I could name 3 players that, had they been playing, would have made that a completely different prospect for Glasgow.
Yeah, and I think the squad depth is the thing, and we'll come on to Glasgow's South Africa tour in the URC when we get over to the Patriot half. But and I hate this, like I don't want to be doing it, and I know it sounds like sour grapes and whatever. That and what am I allowed to say? Cameron Peloto is his username. What Cameron says, he's absolutely bang on. Horn, Brown, and Cummings.
They would have been my names.
Yeah. They would have. At the end of the day, there are World Cup finalists in 3 of the 4 remaining teams.
Yes.
Glasgow are not getting close to that. They were making jokes on the post-match interview when Ryan Wilson was talking to Zach Mercer about Toulon having the private jet fueled up ready to take them home. And like, that's not fully a joke. There's a really famous story about Boujalal being upset with Toulon's performance in a top 14 game and cancelling the private jet and making them go home by coach. Like, we are now dealing with teams with budgets in the tens of millions, which Glasgow don't have. And 3 years ago, I can't imagine being disappointed because I expected to win a Champions Cup quarterfinal, but I did expect to win. And so I am gutted. And it is a disappointment. But, and we'll talk about it again when we go into the URC tour, the longer that went on, the more difficult it was and the more likely Glasgow were to end up with nothing. Because we don't have the squad for 2 competitions. It's that simple, really. And so there is a part of me that's like, well, that was fun. It's a weird feeling to be disappointed to lose a Champions Cup quarter-final because I don't want to say I'm not used to supporting a team that deserves to be in the Champions Cup quarter-finals, but like Glasgow, if you look at the 4 teams who are in the semis, Glasgow are so far off them in terms of resources. And so there is part of me that's a bit like, well, it was fun. We got to the quarters. It's a shame we didn't win. I felt like we should have won. But now we can focus on one competition. And realistically, we've got a squad for one competition. I think what was really disappointing about it, Leslie, is that Glasgow are famous for being able to adjust to what's in front of them. And there was just a real failure to do that. And I don't know, and I don't want to single anybody out, but we were dealing with our third choice scrum half. And when Toulon started rolling over and lying across the breakdown, and Carol Dixon was just stood there saying, well, and this is a direct quote, saying, well, just don't stand on him. When there's a Toulon forward lying where Ben Afshar's looking to get the ball out and get the ball away. That is the sort of thing that Glasgow usually would adjust to, and there just seemed to be, they just weren't picking it up and they weren't adjusting it. And I think that was the frustrating thing for me, Leslie. I don't know. Did you watch it, or are you too sad to watch the Champions Cup quarterfinals?
Well, I had no team involvement, so I didn't need to worry about it, did I? I do just want to say, I did say last week I didn't think they would win, and I was right. Sorry, Johnny. I didn't watch it. I watched back the highlights today. But a couple of things that kind of stood out for me was, yes, again, don't want to pick on Ben. He's just, by the end of the game, I don't know why they didn't bring Jack Oliver on. I know he's very young, but if you're already down, you kind of don't have anything else to lose. Ben's knackered. Get him on. It's not going to go any worse. You're already losing. I thought some of the tries, especially the Toulon, I think it was the third try, some of the defending was quite poor for Glasgow, which we don't normally. No, it was the one before that. I think it was the winner scored.
Oh, I hate him. Gael Bryan.
Yeah. I don't want to call him out, but I'm gonna. Dan Lancaster just sticks his arm out as an attempted tackle. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're the last guy in defence. What's he doing? Really soft, I thought. I would have expected Glasgow to do better than that, because they normally do. But they just look like a lot of tired bodies out there. You know, it's the first. So I kind of watched it in just like kind of chunks, but the first 20 minutes, everybody looks fine, and then by just after halftime, bodies just start to look knackered. And even in attack, Glasgow are normally really fast and they're really like running onto the ball. Just everybody was a bit slow and a bit plodding, and just not the Glasgow that we see. And I don't know if they just, at the end of the season, bodies are tired, just went up for it mentally in the wrong space. I don't know. But yeah, it was disappointing. I know there was lots of injuries, but
do you think it was a bit of expectation, Mark? Because there are people saying, and not just Ryan Wilson, there were people on the Champions Cup socials saying Glasgow are going to win the tournament. I think 8 out of the 10 pundits on the Champions Cup socials had Glasgow in the final, and a few of them had them winning it. And you know, we all, apart from Leslie, expected Glasgow to win that game. Everyone expected Glasgow to win. Toulon made mention of it in their post-match press conferences. Zach Mercer in his pitch side interview said that the women in WH Smith at the airport said, "Oh, good luck if you're playing Glasgow." And that is something that we're not used to and we've always struggled with. Do you think there was a weight of expectation issue for Glasgow?
I think there might have been part of that. I mean, I agree. I wasn't 100% that they'd win, but I was 90% that they'd make the final. So the players are bound to feel that. As much as people say, oh, yeah, the players in every interview, it's just the next game, but that bollocks. There's bound to be a weight of expectation in there. So yeah, I think that was maybe part of it, but I think the kind of depth, and we've spoken about it on here many times, the whole Glasgow process. They talk about the process, and that's why you can take a Kerry Yule and just slot him in, and he sticks to the process and all that kind of thing. When you get to the sharp end of a tournament of that quality, you can't have somebody slot in. Even though they're fit for the process, you can't have them slot in and have a bit of a honking game. So, second row, Jari. I'm a huge fan of Jari Guntabeju. I think he's got a massive future ahead of him and a very high ceiling. But he had a honking game. He had a stinker, right? And when we're missing so many second rows, you can't afford for that to happen, whether they fit into the process or not. And I think it was... I've said many times in a professional capacity, nothing breeds success like success. And I think that can happen on a tournament level, but even on a macro level within games, right? And I think the tiredness, if Glasgow were scoring tries and playing like Glasgow, I don't think you'd have seen that tiredness.
No.
And I think...
And I have to say...
lose to the game plan and strike them, right?
One thing I really liked about Franco's post-match interview, and there are people talking it down. I'm not going to mention who they are because I'll mention the club when it gets the hands of the Rock Time. But what I will say is they got humped out of the Challenge Cup by Exeter last week. So for them to come after us is a bit rich, is what I'll say. And what fans of that club in particular are saying is, I'd be furious if I was you and you just lost the Champions Cup quarterfinal and Franco was talking about going to South Africa to catch the sun for 2 weeks. I actually thought that was great because I'm with you on Jari Guntabeju, and he knew he'd had a stinker on Saturday afternoon. You could see on his face when he came off. There was a few guys that you could see it hadn't gone well for, and actually what Franco's saying about needing a reset and just getting everybody together and going down to South Africa for 2 weeks, I think is actually exactly what Glasgow needs. And I think it will make a difference with the URC to come. Before we disappear off then behind the paywall, I'm going to ask you both the same question. Challenge Cup final 3 years ago, URC champions 2 years ago, Champions Cup quarterfinals at home this year, and URC number 1 seeds as it goes. Leslie, where do Glasgow go next? What are we hoping for next season?
I think unless you sign some players, you're not going to get anything next year. Sorry.
Mark? No, sorry. I thought Leslie was going to stick the knife in and leave it, but she appears to have some kind of justification for that.
I just think you've got so many recent graduate academy, and yes, they've all had game time, but not enough that I think that they could then be expected or hope that they could go on a run in either the URC or the Champions Cup. I think that would be really difficult to expect of such young players. That's all. It's not meant to be a knife to them. It's just expectation, I think.
Mark?
I tend to agree. I agree with Leslie. I don't think Glasgow will challenge next year. I think Glasgow will be top 8. I think we'll be in the playoffs. Maybe even top 4. I mean, who knows? There's still some phenomenal players remaining at Glasgow, and Franco's an excellent coach. But unless we replace some of the real game breakers we've got, some of the go-to guys, Glasgow need a 10. You need an 8, and that's no disrespect to Matt Piggerson. He can't do 8 and 6 at the same time, right? So we signed a big 8, for example, both literally and metaphorically, and a good 10. Then yeah, maybe. But yeah, I see Glasgow getting through to top 8 and playing Champions Cup rugby again, but I don't see them challenging for top spot this time next year. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't.
Right.
See it.
You let me host, so before we disappear, I'm having the last word. I'm with Cameron. He says top 2 next season, and I'll put money on it. I think
Good man, Cameron.
I think you're both right. I think the loss of Jack Dempsey is huge. I do think Stafford McDowell has mitigated the loss of Hugh Jones a little bit.
Mhm.
I think as much as Adam Hastings can be a difference maker at times, I think Dan Lancaster's had a really good season, but I do think we still need another really good 10, or at least another competent 10. I think Glasgow are still one of the top teams in the URC next year. Those losses will hurt. The Jack Dempsey one is the really big one. So somebody needs to come in who can fill that. And I mean, filling the Jack Dempsey role is almost impossible. Craig's not here. I can say what I want. Jack Dempsey is one of the best players Glasgow have ever had and has made a massive difference to Scotland as well. And he's phenomenal. And losing him will be massive. But if we can even slightly mitigate that, I think Glasgow are still one of the best teams in the URC. I think you might be right about the Champions Cup. I will concede that. But I think I don't think we can accept a step as far backwards as you were suggested, Leslie. I think Glasgow still need to be a challenger. Because we can't have 3 years of the progress that Glasgow have had, and then for that to just be all completely wiped away. I'll be posting your thank you, David Nucifora meme every single day.
The way to say that, yeah.
Because that will be vandalism, as far as I'm concerned. So I think Glasgow can and should still be challengers in the URC. You might be right about the Champions Cup.
Oh, I hope I'm wrong. I do. They'll still be better than Edinburgh, which is really all that matters, isn't it?
Well, that's it. Even with all my negativity, I'm thinking that Glasgow won't challenge. I still think they'll make top 8. And comfortably, you know.
All right,
I'm not even sure where I see Edinburgh making top 8 next year.
We have. I'm going to disappear off to the Patreon, but we've got a really good segue / cliffhanger for anyone who doesn't pay for the Patreon yet, which is Hitchhiker's Pie on YouTube says, "Do you think Glasgow would be better off now they can only focus on one competition?" Short answer: yes. That is the basis of my entire conversation about Glasgow's South African tour in the URC. It is the reason that I am only 85% gutted about going out of the Champions Cup. And I think it is a massive key. So yes is the short answer. If you want to hear the full answer, we're off to Patreon to preview this weekend's games. But for now, for the public pod, it is goodbye from me and goodbye from Mark and Leslie.
See you, folks.
Bye.
Cheers.